right. Well, I hope everybody's doing well. I'm doing pretty well. I'm doing pretty well. Actually, I'm not doing really all that great. I've been super sick, and so this is going to be a short, easy, quick live tonight. And we're going to be talking about the top 3 things that chap my ass that people say when it comes to workplace bullying. And I just recently wrote about this, and so I'll put that article, that link down below. And before I forget, again, like, follow, comment, subscribe, do all those wonderful things. I'd super appreciate it. And also, if you haven't been to stopbullyculture.com, we recently changed our website and moved it and all those things. It's still stopbullyculture.com. But I've updated the resource hub and all those things. So anyway, it's worth checking out. So we're going to talk about the top 3 things that really chap my ass when it comes to workplace bullying. And I'm sure this is a shocker for you. I have a lot of things that really chap my ass that people say around the issue of workplace bullying, that really, again, the essence of these things are that really they are about victim blaming. So if I say, for example, one of them is that really bothers me a lot is that somehow if you speak up or you've reported the bully or you've done something like that, that's the reason you're being bullied. And first off, if you've reported them, it's likely that you were being mistreated before. It isn't like, you've reported them, and maybe you've reported them for something else, which is irrelevant, and that's the reason you're being bullied. And why that bothers me so much is, again, it's the undercurrent of victim blaming, is that you've done something like report a colleague who's unprofessional, or if you've reported that person, they've obviously done something in the workplace that isn't great, and as a result of that, you're the one who's being bullied. Okay, again, it focuses on you and your actions rather than on the person who is bullying and the perpetrator of this aggression. It isn't about you. It's not about them, it's about you. Okay, and there are all different reasons that people are bullied. The other thing that bothers me, again, and there is, some research I think that does say, yeah, if you speak up or, you've reported them, that might increase your likelihood that you're bullied. But those are all based on victim interviews, victim input. So for example, I might get a survey as a person who's been bullied, and I say, yep, I think this is the reason I was bullied. Okay, that's not, again, I'm not saying that's not good evidence. I'm just saying that I think it's questionable evidence. And there are all different reasons that you're bullied. Okay, for example, I didn't do a thing to be bullied. Okay, I came into an environment that was rampant with bullying. They had somebody just exit who was a victim, so they had an opening. My mere existence made me a victim of bullying. It had nothing to do with what I did or what I didn't do. Okay, because I hadn't even made it on campus and had been already. I already had to choose a side, right? You either were with the bully or you weren't, okay? And so there are just all sorts of things that happened, okay? And I'm not responsible for how other people treat me. And so that is one of the things that bothers me, is that this idea that we blame the victim rather than the perpetrator. You'll also see that all of these 3 things that chap my ass around workplace bullying are all related to how and what I should have done or didn't do versus there's no conversation or narrative or anything, any narrative or any conversation around what the bully is doing to me. It's all about, again, I spoke up, therefore I'm being bullied. The other one is that, oh, you should just ignore it. Okay, again, you know, these are, this is abuse. Okay, this isn't a one-off where somebody, you know, interrupted me in a meeting. This is where somebody in the workplace, and I had more than one aggressor and abuser. It wasn't like I had just one bully. I had more than one bully and several bystanders who went along and were part of that abusive process. This wasn't a one-off interruption. This was an organization and people in my workplace who were at the same level as I was, who were seeking me out intentionally to harm and hurt me. So did I try to ignore it? Of course we did. I mean, come on, everybody who's been bullied or mistreated in the workplace, you always try that. That's like your go-to intervention, okay? But it's not a one-off. And if I could have ignored it and let it go, I think I would have, right? But it's when you have people in your workplace who are seeking you out, trying to hurt you, that it's not an issue of whether or not you can ignore it. You know, there were a lot of things I ignored that didn't stop them from coming after me. That didn't stop people in my workplace from saying, I'm getting her, right? Quote unquote. Okay. The other thing is we also often say too, again, document. I was thinking about this as I was just kind of going over and kind of figuring out what I was going to talk about tonight. And, you know, I never had anybody in my workplace, like a union representative, the union president, HR, the HR director. I never had my supervisor tell me to document. Never. What I had was, when I first transitioned from practice, social work practice, into social work education, is I had a mentor. They assigned me to a mentor who was exemplary, and she said, the guy you're working with is a problem. What I'd recommend is you start documenting. And she told me to document, which is exactly what I did. And again, ignore it, document. Those are all self-blaming and victim-blaming responses to a problem that is an organizational culture who has allowed a bully and abusers to take over their culture, where bullying has become the norm. So again, these are victim-blaming responses. And first off, if you tell me to document, what should I document? Do I document every interaction? Do I document only digital interactions? Do I need, you know, a lot of verbatim, you know, details, or should I sum things up? Do I need evidence? How do I organize it? Is it in a timeline fashion? Okay, and the reality is nobody looked at my documentation in the 20 years that I was bullied. The only time is when I got let go and fired, and we filed a union grievance after I was out of that organization, and the union president said, oh, you've got a lot of good documentation here. Yeah, you might have thought about looking at it beforehand. That might have been helpful, and we maybe wouldn't have had to be in this, you know, situation. And the other thing is, again, just some friendly advice when it comes to documenting, is if you're in HR or you're a union representative, if you tell somebody to document, you better tell them how to do it, what you need, what documentation am I going to give you, and what can I present with you that's going to show you what I'm telling you to be fact, is that I'm being abused in the workplace by that colleague or that supervisor or that person. Okay, what is it you need? Don't tell me to document if you're not telling me what you need. And you can easily, again, if you are in a situation where you're being bullied, again, go to shop.stopbullyculture.com. I have several resources on there. I have a power pack on documentation mastery and the SMART documentation at work. Easy to understand, step by step, do A, do B, do C. Okay, there's good ways to document, there's bad ways to document, and the other thing is, if you're documenting merely to document, there's no point in that. Your documentation, I am a huge fan. Look, I love me some good documentation. What you need to understand is that your documentation is a tool for protection for yourself. It is not about whether they're going to take down the, you're going to take out the bully or not. The likelihood of that is slim to none. Here's an example. I was bullied. This was before I even had ever heard of the term workplace bullying. This was my first teaching job. And this guy was he was an abuser in the workplace. And he, I think I've maybe told this story before. But he came at me in our little, in our office space, in our office area. We had 4 or 5 offices in an area, and there was a little, space out in between those offices. And he came at me yelling, cursing, swearing, all of these things, okay? Of course, I was, off, of course I was like, what's going on? Other people were there. Nobody said anything, okay? I eventually, just tried to use neutral statements. You know me, I'm a fan of the neutral scripts. And what I finally ended up doing was saying to him, hey, Jerry, I've got to get into my office. And I went into my office and closed the door so he couldn't come in. I put a physical barrier so he couldn't keep coming at me. Then my sister Joy passed away, and I took a week off of bereavement for her death. And when I came back, the day I came back, I was brought into the provost's office, who was like very, he's upset because he knew my sister had passed away, and he was, I'm sorry I have to bring you in. But this guy had made allegations. Everything that he had done to me, he accused me of doing. Well, fortunately, my mentor Patty had said document everything. So I was able to go to my office, pull out my documentation, tell the provost exactly what happened, who was there, what was said, and then basically that documentation was my saving grace. And so you can use your documentation for protection like that to say, oh no, that didn't happen. Because bullies have this tendency to make vague and kind of broad and, well, let me just say it, lie about what's happening. And when you can come back and say, oh, here, just let me pull this out. Oh, you know what, on this date, this happened, and so was there, and I said this, and they said that, and they said this, and I said this. It makes a better case than these kind of broad lies. Okay, so when you can counter their bullshit with facts, it makes a difference, and guess what? It helps your credibility, and it protects you. Okay, so, I spoke up. That's why I'm bullied. That's number 1. Document or ignore it. That's number 2. And here's my final one. Actually, it's not, because I have a bonus one. The other thing that really chaps my ass when it comes to workplace bullying is that we assume it's interpersonal conflict. So you probably know that I have Googled the definition, and yes, you're right, I have created my own complex definition of workplace bullying. But most definitions of workplace bullying are basically this. You have a person in your workplace who quote unquote targets another person with the intention of harm, and that's got all these behaviors listed. That's basically it. That's basically interpersonal conflict. And when we treat workplace bullying as conflict, it's a huge problem. okay? Because it's a culture and organizational cultural issue. When we take it down to, oh, it's psychological, it's a psychological safety issue, we're not really understanding, and we're not including that it's actually a health issue. It's a mental health issue. It's a job issue. It's a client issue. It's an organizational profit issue. We're underscoring all of these and sort of letting all these other things off the hook. Is workplace bullying psychological abuse? Yeah, of course it is. But it's so much more than that. And when we call it something as, again, medial as conflict, it allows people in our workplace, including leaders, including HR, including union representatives and organization and association leaders, to blow it off, again, as if documenting will take care of it, as if ignoring it is going to get rid of it, okay? As if somehow the problem, again, is with me, like we've had some issue, and that's why I'm being bullied. Okay, I had no issue with the people who are bullying me. They had an issue with me. It wasn't the other way around. Okay, and so when we call it conflict, it's really just, I find it very insulting, because the issue of workplace abuse is very systematic, complex, and problematic. So the other thing I do want to say is my other one that, again, I did not include in my article, but I am going to tell you it, right? In case I become famous and this is ever a Jeopardy question, is one of the things that bothers me also is this idea of referring to somebody who's in an abusive workplace situation, that we call that person a target. And that bothers me personally and professionally. Because again, what the assumption is when I say to you, oh, you're a target of workplace bullying, okay? For the record, right? I try not to use that word target, and I try to use recipient, right? You're the one receiving the bullying, right? It's coming directed at you. Person being bullied, person being abused, you're not a target in the workplace. Using the term target, why it bothers me so bad is it assumes that somehow, again, when you walked into that place of employment, whether that was your hospital or your school or your local store or your local, realtor's office or mechanic's place, that somehow when you walked in, on your back you had this invisible target, right? Like a bullseye that said, you know what? That person, there's something about that person's going to be bullied. And that's just couldn't be further from the truth. Again, that's victim blaming. Bullying is not about you. Unfortunately, it is about the person who is doing the abuse, the organizational culture that is allowing you to be abused, right? You didn't put a target on your back and say, oh yeah, I think I'll go to place agency A and, maybe I'll be, get bullied there. You're being bullied, again, not because of who you are, but because of who your coworkers are, who your leadership is, what organizational you're working in, that the culture is dysfunctional. It is about them. And when we call you a target, again, it blames you for a problem that you probably walked into. You didn't cause that. There is nothing you or anybody could do in the workplace that would deserve to be bullied and mistreated and harmed, period. Full stop. But when we call you a target, then what we're saying is that somehow who you are as your intercore, your authentic you, made you vulnerable to bullying, when in fact you became vulnerable to be bullying because there's a bully in your workplace. That's why you're being bullied. And so those are my top 3 plus my bonus things that people say that really chap my ass. And I wish we would change the narrative around workplace bullying. We need to call it workplace abuse. We need to get a definition around workplace abuse that goes beyond this idea that it's just a set of behaviors. Right? It isn't. It's much more complex than that. And what we also need to do is we need to get people in positions of leadership, human resources, right? Here's a little FYI, human resource personnel are often bullied. They're not immune from being bullied, okay? And we often tell them or give them the responsibility that somehow they are, it's their responsibility to fix it, when in fact that's absolutely not true. It's leadership's responsibility to fix it, not necessarily HR. And if we don't give them the tools to help people like myself to deal with workplace bullying, then all they're doing is really stirring a pot of a messy shit show that just keeps going on and on and on. All right. Well, I got a little boost of energy there, having been sick for a few days. So again, if you haven't gone to shop.stopbullyculture.com, go check out those resources for documentation. I put up something new just about whether or not, how do you determine if you're being bullied and what are your kind of first steps. The other thing that's super exciting that I think is really, really important is we don't have enough resources to help people who are being bullied to get through everyday work. And I'm putting together 30 days of, living through workplace bullying, and I'm going to try to have that up in the next couple of days. So make sure you go to, the shop to look at that. And once I get that available, I'll put the links in my Facebook and on YouTube and etc. Again, if you need anything, you can always message me, or you can email me at jan@stopbullyculture.com. And one thing I want to just give you some parting words is that if you are being bullied, first off, I'm really sorry about that. You don't deserve that. And secondly, what I want you to do is, try to do one relaxing, fun thing at work tomorrow and try to weave that into your day, even if it's listening to a song, even if it's grabbing a cup of coffee. Is you deserve to be in a workplace where you're safe, and you also deserve to laugh even if you're in a bully culture. So I'm not quite sure what we will do next week. I'm a little bit in limbo, but hopefully I will come up with something fun and exciting. And thank you so much for being here. I really, really appreciate you, and I will see you next time.